What you notice first about people is what they are. You notice their people type. Instantly, you note Leanne and Sally are women, while Jared and Arvind are men. It seems almost automatic. You see other differences. Perhaps you call them ethnic, culture, or even race. It's as if your brain insists on creating categories and groups. To ask you not to create groups is like asking you not to think of a pink elephant for 20 seconds. You rebel against the idea that people are all the same. You can see the differences. The people categories you use most are simple: us and them. People who look somewhat like you, who talk, eat, and dress like you, are us, while everyone else is them. If Earth were invaded by skinny green aliens, humans worldwide would certainly see the creatures as thems, while any human would be an us. Lacking greenish space invaders, we settle for more subtle differences. Like food. We tend to group people who eat foods we don't as them. Our culture teaches what is appropriate as food. Us eats cows and chickens. People who eat bugs or cats are them. We also learn how to eat from our culture. You won't walk into a lunchroom in Iowa and find 100 kids using chopsticks. Your eyes are drawn to differences, as in the eating styles here. Leanne eats with chopsticks, Arvind and Jared with their hands, and Sally with a knife and fork. You probably assume Jared eats with his hands because he is eating finger foods, but you judge that Arvind uses his hands because that's what his people type does. Viewers who eat like Jared and Sally consider themselves an us, and the others as them. When they hear Leanne and Arvind speak an unfamiliar language, the grouping is even more certain. This sorting into them and us is not a failing. It's our brains at work. It's similar to learning a language. We all do it, but which language we learn depends on our culture. How we group people into them and us depends on our culture and upbringing. Some children grow up learning class or caste is the most important us and them. Others are taught it's religion, while many learn that race or ethnic group is critical. Making categories is not prejudice. Prejudice requires one more idea: judging the thems or their behavior as inferior.
Why don't these people see that knives, forks, and spoons are the best way to handle food? Why use 2 sticks to eat? Is that all they can afford? And using hands? That's Stone Age. My way is natural, and theirs is, well, someday they'll learn.
I don't understand these Westerners. Why do they insist on doing at the table what clearly should be done in the kitchen? She shouldn't have to hack up her food at the table. They don't see that cutting meat is a job for the chef, not the eater.
Contact with food is part of the joy of eating. Why use wood or metal tools for something as intimate as eating? Are they afraid of food? Perhaps. Someday they'll discover.
All 4 of our eaters learned how to eat from their culture. A culture teaches the way us behaves. Parents make it clear that our way is best, even if they never use those words. Many teach a respect for other cultures, but our way is still the way. You won't find a culture that teaches, I know this isn't a very good way to eat, but it's what we do. In all societies, parents shape children to become one of us. Culture becomes part of their identity, part of the answer to the question, who am I and how should I behave? Did you notice Jared eats with his left hand? If not, it's likely you never learned to create the people-type left-handed eaters. But in some cultures, especially in India and the Middle East, eating with the left hand is either forbidden or at least rude. To members of these cultures, Jared's eating style alone would land him in the them category. So our eaters fall into people types that vary with the viewer. Some see important differences, others do not. For example, Jared is a lefty, a minority group who makes up about 10% of the population. They are discriminated against in many ways, and often hear words and phrases that suggest they are inferior. To millions in the world, the left hand is unclean. It is the hand associated with the devil or toilet functions. But even in cultures lacking that belief, who wants a left-handed compliment? Sinister comes from the Latin word for left. Many languages have a word for awkward that refers to the left side. The right hand is raised or placed on the Bible to take an oath. Salutes and pledges use the right hand. The guest of honor sits on the right hand of the host, and the second in charge is the right-hand man. Until the latter part of the 20th century, schools and parents often punished children who tried to write with the left hand. The world is designed for righties. Scissors are painful over time for lefties. So are spiral notebooks and loose-leaf binders. Generations of lefties struggled to adapt to desks like these. Studies show that timed test scores of lefties were lower in this kind of desk. Most desks today are more accepting of the left-handed minority. Left-handed people don't choose to be left-hand dominant. If we were taught from a very young age that lefties were dishonest or mentally twisted, we would see lots of dishonest or weird lefties. Most lefties see themselves as inconvenienced, but not as discriminated against. We make some physical differences the basis for people types. Others we ignore. Gender differences we notice. Size we notice, as in fat and thin, perhaps short and tall. We notice skin color, but pay less attention to hair or eye color. You have clearly visible physical traits inherited from your parents, traits you cannot change, that place you in a minority. These traits are visible once you are taught to see them, yet we do not use them to define people types. Here are a few examples. Some people create a dimple when they smile. Others do not. It's an inherited trait. No amount of practice will turn the dimpleless into the dimpled. Or the ability to roll your tongue, like this. Some people are born able to do this, while others cannot. But we attach no special importance to this physical difference. Some people have attached earlobes, and some earlobes that are unattached. It's a real difference. People who can bend their thumbs to hitch a ride, and those who can't. We don't use these physical differences to define people types. Yet each defines a clear minority. Between 70 to 90% of humans have free-hanging earlobes, can roll their tongue, and are right-handed. You might say we don't use these differences because they're not important. But what if you were raised being taught that they are important, and that they do define clear people types? First, we create the category. Then we notice the differences. For example, you probably didn't learn about Arabs by studying or living in the Middle East. You heard the label as a kid and built a vague picture based on movies, newspaper stories, and what you heard from others. You learn which categories to notice as a child. Remember, first we learn the category. Then we find information to confirm it. If you grew up learning that people with dimples were not trustworthy, you might today have doubts about trusting a dimpled person. It's not that we notice people types because they're important. Rather, they're important because we notice them.